There are a lot of great things to say about Cormac McCarthy. And first, we're going to review The Road, but there's a lot of backstory to my experience with Cormac McCarthy. I've read two of his previous books, Child of God and All the Pretty Horses. When I was studying creative writing in university at Concordia back in 2001, there was an interesting, we had one teacher. It was such a strange little phenomenon. We had this one teacher, and that was the first time I ever heard of Cormac McCarthy back then, 20 years ago. So he's been really like getting up there, and now like with, films being made from his books like No Country for Old Men. Even All the Pretty Horses was a film, although I haven't seen it. He's a big literary figure now. And this won the Pulitzer Prize, The Road. So anyway, back then, there's a bit of a backstory. I had heard of, the teacher recommended him, and this is what he said. He said like, he was, saying like certain types of writers, like Hemingway, and then Cormac McCarthy, he said, was in that line. And I never forgot that because I knew very little about, literature back then. And I'd heard of Hemingway, but I don't think at that point I even read anything, and except for an article after he had passed, and it was about a biography of him. So I knew he was like a macho guy, and Hemingway was, and so I didn't know much, and I read Child of God around that time, but to be honest, I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all, and I don't remember much from it except for the fact that I didn't get it. And I found like the language pretty abstract and very poetic, but by this point he's mastered, his style. And one thing I want to say about the contrast, if you ever encounter comparisons of Cormac McCarthy with Hemingway, it's interesting to read like old pioneers, because I recently read a short story by Hemingway, the short and happy life of Francis, and his style was innovative at the time, but it's amazing to see like how fluid and like how much more advanced writers are nowadays. But Cormac McCarthy is like the top of the top, from what little sample that I've read, and this deserves every praise it gets. So, The Road. The backstory that I know about this is that he had a child late. I remember seeing this Oprah interview, and he was like in his 50s, I think, when he had his first child. So this book is dedicated to his son, his actual son. And what it basically is a father and son in kind of trying to survive in an apocalyptic world of the future. It's not quite zombies, but it's like everything is ashen and cold, and there's cannibals, groups of cannibals, and there's no food, and they're scavenging from house to house, abandoned house to abandoned house in towns, and they're trying to find like canned food, anything that's good. Sometimes they have to boil things a lot to make sure that it's good enough to eat. And they're trying to make their way to the West Coast. For some reason, the father just wants. It's such an abstract thing, because it seems like the father you have to pick the destination. You have to live. You have to kind of raise your son, and you don't know where you're, like, there's no reason to really go to the West Coast. I mean, it's not like they get to the ocean and, like, everything's going to be wonderful. What they end up finding is nothing like before. But it's like these objectives, and along the way there's like all these life lessons in this very abstract sense, and a lot of them went over my head. It definitely deserves a second reading. It's a really easy read, big text, a lot of spacing, which I want to talk about. But yeah, there's all these life lessons in it, based on the people they encounter. And the kid is like about 11, and he's emaciated, like he's really thin, and like they're both really thin, and they encounter different characters. Like there's an old man that's like just kind of going on the road. There's like, they see crazy stuff, and the kid is like shocked, he sees like, the cannibals and things like that. And so the father's trying to, help his son deal with like the harsh realities, the absolute extreme of what like a human being is capable of, and he's trying to raise somebody proper. And at the end, the ending is like so beautiful, because I'm going to spoil it. Like there's little spoilers here. But by the end, like the father dies and leaves the kid, and he's still young, and like a man finds him, and there's this really great moment that I love where the son has this gun that was left over to him with one bullet in it. And the man he luckily encounters is like, he's got a wife and another little girl back home. And it's kind of a nice little happy ending in a way, because if he brings this orphan son now to that family, maybe he'll get along with the girl, and she's around his age, and maybe society can like live on, So it's got all these implications. But then there's this moment that I absolutely love, where the kid is like so innocent that at one point he tries to hand over the gun to like the man, kind of compromising himself, and the man goes, no, like, holy crow, you're like, he doesn't say it, but like he's like, oh, come on, like you're almost being too innocent, He's like, no, you keep that gun, don't worry. It's like, so it's like, but in a way it's so smartly written, because in a way like the kid, he compromises himself in a way to like test the sincerity of and the trustability of the man he encounters. So I love that little moment. And in terms of the style, there's no quotations on any dialogue, but it's like, it's so clear, you can't mistake the dialogue for anything else. I think the first little while, see, like the dialogue is like that. To make lights, yes, to make lights. Can we go down there and see it? I think it's too far. Will the dam be there for a long time? So you could tell easily who's saying what. Yeah, everything is a poem. What I love about this was it was so easy to get through, because he did such a wonderful job of like just creating and isolating these scenes, and each one reads obviously like a little poem and advances the story beautifully. Yeah, his dialogue is so clear, so easy to follow. What makes it a little bit easier is that there's just two people in All the Pretty Horses. There's a lot of that too. It's like two people kind of trying to cross the border, and that's good. He deals with like intimate situations. So yeah, there are these great life lessons, which I mentioned earlier. Here's a little excerpt that I like to read. This was one I isolated to give you an example of his writing. In the evening, they tramped out across the field trying to find a place where their fire would not be seen, dragging the cart behind them over the ground. So little of promise in that country. Tomorrow they would find something to eat. Night overtook them on a muddy road. They crossed into a field and plodded on toward a distant stand of trees, skylighted stark and black against the last of the visible world. By the time they got there, it was dark of night. He held the boy's hand and picked up limbs and brush and got a fire going. The wood was damp, but he shaved the dead bark off with his knife, and he stacked brush and sticks all about to dry in the heat. Then he spread the sheet of plastic on the ground and got the coats and blankets from the cart, and he took off their damp and muddy shoes, and they sat there in silence with their hands outheld to the flames. He tried to think of something to say, but he could not. He'd had this feeling before, beyond the numbness and the dull despair. The world shrinking down about a raw core or of parsable entities. The names of things slowly following those things into oblivion. Colors. The names of birds, things to eat. Finally, the names of things one believed to be true. More fragile than he would have thought. How much was gone already? The sacred idiom shorn of its reference and so of its reality, drawing down like something trying to preserve heat in time to wink out forever. I like the ending of Forever. You know, he uses a lot of like these really powerful big words like forever, darkness. He uses darkness a lot. Everything like it's repetitive, and the repetitive of these kind of generalized words, but yet very powerful words, have a strong effect because it's like it puts you in a trance in a way. So I mean, I think that was like the only one I marked, but there's like so many like that. There's so many passages that are really interesting. One thing that I like to note, which I learned through reading this novel, was that he uses very simple words like Hemingway. There's a similarity there. But what's not simple is like certain things that like certain other technical words. So towards the end of the novel, he encounters they get to the shore, and then they find a toppled ship, you know, on the a few meters into the water, and he goes up ahead and he goes through there and he sees what he finds, and there he finds this sextant, like a navigation tool that sailors used to use, kind of like a compass, but it's very specified. And he finds it in this box, and he opens the box and he finds this thing, and it's like shiny and new, and I'm sure there's like symbolism which I don't totally get, you know. I'm sure it's like related to the course that like when he encounters that, he's like, you know, where am I going, you know, like it's so deep. And but what I liked about it is like I wasn't familiar with that instrument, you know, so he's examining it. I forget what page it was on, but I remember what it was, and he's examining it, and it's just kind of like I had to look it up because I wasn't familiar with it. And it was things like that he's very specific about, like even when he explores houses at parts, like there's certain technical things that he's aware of, and it just shows his vast knowledge of specific things. And I thought as a writer that was something important to know, that you could use simple language, but there's technical things, that you should use, like, because there's no other way to describe it, and that's the beauty of it. Like, it's important as a writer to know those technical words for things, for specific things, and then the rest of the language you can make easy that anybody can understand, and that makes it more timeless. Like, it's more accessible. Everybody has a preference, and not everybody would like this. Some readers prefer authors that really use like flowery language and use a large vocabulary. But to me, he shows that he's much more intelligent in making things simple and really insinuating these grander ideas about relationships and about raising a child. And he deals with very serious topics in this, it was powerful that way. And then also towards the end, there's like a scene where in the same ship they found a flare gun, and they fired that off as kind of like a celebration of sorts at one point. I'm sure there's like symbolism there as well, with the flare gun. Yeah, so just a very highly recommended book. Definitely a book that deserves a reread as well. Very easy and quick to get through. I think like the audio book was like 4 or 5 hours, which is, you can listen while you exercise in a week's time basically, and be done with the book. That's actually how I did it. What I did was like I would exercise, listen to the audiobook, which had a good reading, but then I had the book near me, so I would pause it and at certain parts and I'd pick up the book and track down the page and read it, because some of them are like so beautiful that you just have to like see it for yourself, and then the ending, the last 20 pages I read, like I just sat down and read it, and it was a tearful conclusion to me. I kind of like suspend disbelief in these experiences, like I do that with film and like writing, where I really get sucked into the emotions of the story. I let myself do that, and it was powerful, like very, very powerful. Highly recommended. That's all I think I can say about it. It's just like very, very good. I mean, Pulitzer Prize winner, highly deserved. I was trying to read like another Pulitzer Prize recently, and I don't like it at all. So I don't like everything. Just because it wins a prize, to me, doesn't mean anything. Just because something's like a New York bestseller doesn't mean it's like actually good. And I like stories that have something to say, and this is like it's a book that has something to say, whether you're a parent or not. It's more than about that. It's also, you could just study the language, the beauty of the language. I wonder if I should try to read. So as the last thing, I'll read the beginning, and see if I do it any justice. When he woke in the woods in the dark and the cold of the night, he'd reach out to touch the child sleeping beside him. Nights dark beyond darkness, and the days more gray each one than what had gone before. Like the onset of some cold glaucoma dimming away the world. His hand rose and fell softly with each precious breath. He pushed away the plastic tarpaulin and raised himself in the stinking robes and blankets and looked toward the east for any light, but there was none. In the dream from which he'd awakened, he had wandered in a cave where the child led him by the hand. their light playing over the wet flowstone walls, like pilgrims in a fable swallowed up and lost among the inward parts of some granitic beast. Deep stone flues where the water dripped and sang, toiling in the silence the minutes of the earth and the hours and the days of it and the years without cease, until they stood in a great stone room where lay a black and ancient lake, and on the far shore a creature that raised its dripping mouth from the rimstone pool and stared into the light with eyes dead white and sightless as the eggs of spiders. It swung its head low over the water as if to take the scent of what it could not see, crouching there, pale and naked and translucent, its alabaster bones cast up in shadow on the rocks behind it. Its bowels, its beating heart. The brain had pulsed in a dull glass bell. It swung its head from side to side and then gave out a low moan and turned and lurched away and loped soundlessly into the dark. That's the beginning. So if you like that kind of writing, hopefully I didn't ruin the reading too badly. It was great. So what I meant about words is he uses glaucoma, certain words that are very specific, flowstone, words that I didn't encounter regularly, and alabaster. These are words that I'm always a little unsure of. So sometimes I need to look them up, especially specific colors like that. So anyways, so he's really descriptive and he's really selective of his words. But then, he ends into the dark. He starts in the dark, into the dark. So it's interesting to open with this dream sequence, and I'm sure there's all these meanings that smart people have analyzed. And maybe I'll figure out exactly on my own what it might mean in a rereading. So a wonderful book, highly recommended.